The studio lights brightened as the discussion began. Dana Bash welcomed the audience and explained that the goal of the night's program was to have a meaningful conversation about women's leadership in America. She introduced Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and former First Lady Melania Trump, noting that both women brought different experiences, public roles, and perspectives to the table. Bash opened with a broad question. When you think about women's leadership, what comes to mind? What qualities matter most? The camera moved toward Melania Trump as she prepared to speak. Her tone remained even and deliberate, a style people associated with her public appearances. She said leadership for women meant approaching complicated responsibilities with calm, steady purpose. She emphasized how during her time as First Lady, she supported initiatives centered on children, wellness, and digital responsibility. To her, lifting people up and focusing on positive goals reflected the best form of leadership. Congresswoman Crockett listened closely before responding. She agreed that uplifting others mattered, but added that leadership also needed honesty, transparency, and the willingness to speak up when something important required attention. For her, being a leader meant using your role to highlight issues that often didn't get enough visibility. She emphasized authenticity and clarity, explaining that public service worked best when people felt they were seeing the true values of the person representing them. Melania asked calmly whether Crockett believed her approach lacked authenticity. The Congresswoman replied that she simply believed leadership looked different for everyone, and that quieter styles could sometimes limit opportunities to address larger concerns or national conversations. The atmosphere shifted, not in a hostile way, but with a sense that both women were ready to defend their beliefs strongly. The former First Lady explained that she preferred to focus on constructive conversations rather than constant public commentary. She described her style as thoughtful and intentional, emphasizing that she believed calm voices helped reduce tension during difficult moments. Crockett responded that sometimes public leadership required stepping forward more directly, even when the topics were difficult or controversial. Dana Bash attempted to guide the conversation back to broader leadership themes, but both women seemed committed to making their viewpoints clear. Crockett said leadership meant advocating for communities that often lacked resources or representation. Melania Trump countered that leadership also meant maintaining compassion and dignity, especially during complicated national debates. Bash suggested they reflect on what leadership looked like in practical terms. Melania described her work visiting schools, speaking with families, and focusing on child-centered programs. She said her efforts were meant to highlight positive actions people could take in their communities. Crockett explained that her own work in Congress focused on legislation, oversight, and promoting fairness in government systems. She emphasized that leadership involved speaking directly about challenges so solutions could be found. As the discussion continued, the tone grew more intense, but remained respectful. Crockett said some Americans felt that public figures sometimes avoided addressing difficult issues, making it harder for people to understand their positions. Melania responded that thoughtful leadership didn't always mean immediate public reactions, and that her approach had always been based on careful consideration rather than instant commentary. The audience, instructed to remain quiet, occasionally reacted softly to the sharper moments of contrast between the two women. Melania noted that people often misunderstand the pressures of a high-profile national role. Crockett replied that many people in public service faced pressures, but leadership meant addressing those pressures openly instead of retreating from them. Bash stepped in again and redirected the conversation toward policy discussions. She asked Melania Trump how her experience as an immigrant influenced her understanding of American life. Melania explained that coming to the United States gave her a deep appreciation for opportunity and hard work. She said she valued the principles of dedication and perseverance that shaped her journey. Crockett listened, then explained her own American experience grounded in the history of her family and community. She emphasized that people showed love for America in many different ways and that one experience did not diminish another. Melania clarified that she respected all American stories and was speaking from her personal perspective. Crockett replied that acknowledging different experiences was important to building unity and understanding across communities. Bash noted that both women represented different parts of the American story, and that leadership grew stronger when those stories could coexist without dismissing each other. When Bash asked about how personal history shaped leadership styles, Melania spoke about adapting to a role that involved national visibility and balancing responsibilities with public expectations. Crockett said her own leadership approach was shaped by the everyday experiences of people who relied on elected officials to speak up for them. The debate continued with steady energy. Crockett emphasized that leaders should use their voices to support people facing challenges. Melania emphasized that leaders should remain composed and considerate even under scrutiny. The two women exchanged thoughtful disagreements about visibility, action, and the meaning of responsibility. Though their tones differed, both remained engaged and confident in their viewpoints.
The conversation lasted much longer than expected, covering topics from community advocacy to national identity, from constructive dialogue to the importance of public engagement. While the discussion was passionate, the two women ultimately expressed a shared belief that leadership, especially women's leadership, played a vital role in shaping a more inclusive future for America. Bash closed the program by thanking both guests for their honesty and willingness to discuss important issues. The audience applauded as the studio lights dimmed. The debate had been lively, complex, and full of contrasting perspectives, but it reflected the broader national conversation about what leadership in modern America truly means. Melania straightened in her chair as the discussion intensified. "I worked hard," she said firmly. "I built a career before politics. I earned the place I have in this country." Her tone was controlled, but carried a hint of frustration. Jasmine Crockett shook her head slightly. "Many people work hard," she replied. "But we also have to recognize that different people have different levels of access. Some immigrants get opportunities that others never even see. Acknowledging privilege doesn't erase your effort, but it does make the story more complete." Melania's expression tightened. "That comment is insulting." "It's not meant to be insulting," Jasmine countered. "It's meant to be honest. When you step into public leadership, people expect transparency. Leadership means telling the full story, not only the comfortable parts." Melania suddenly stood up. Her movements were sharp, signaling irritation. "I don't have to stay here and be spoken to like this." Jasmine's response came quickly, calm but firm. "You accepted this debate. You came here to speak about leadership. Leaders don't walk away the moment someone challenges them. They engage. They answer hard questions. They stand in the tension. This is not tension. This is attack. This is accountability," Jasmine replied. "And accountability is fundamental to leadership." The former First Lady hesitated. The cameras captured every second of her indecision. Walking out would dominate the news. Staying might mean facing more difficult questions. After a long pause, she sat down again, her posture defensive and closed. "I will continue," Melania said at last, "but I expect respect." "I've shown respect," Jasmine answered. "I've also shown honesty. If direct questions feel disrespectful, that is less about my tone and more about your expectations." Dana Bash quickly stepped in. "Let's move to something more specific, Mrs. Trump. In recent interviews, you said you sometimes disagreed with decisions made during your husband's administration. Could you share one or two areas where your views differed?" Melania exhaled slowly, relieved at the shift. "Of course, I didn't always agree with every decision. I had my own opinions, but I believed my role was to support, without adding unnecessary conflict. What exactly did you disagree with? Jasmine pressed. Not in general terms. What policy, what decision, what moment made you step back and say, I wish this had been handled differently? Melania hesitated again. I shared my concerns privately. That's the same answer every time, Jasmine replied. And it raises questions. If disagreements were meaningful, why didn't they ever show up publicly? Leadership isn't just private feelings. It's action. It's using your influence to shape outcomes. I couldn't control every situation. No one expected you to control anything, Jasmine said. But you had a platform. People paid attention to you. If there were issues you felt strongly about, why not make those disagreements known? Why not advocate publicly? You don't know what happened behind closed doors. Then tell us, Jasmine said evenly. If you had meaningful conversations, share them. Explain how you used your influence. Give even one concrete example of a moment where you took a stand. Melania remained quiet. The silence hung in the air. That's what I suspected, Jasmine said. You want recognition for private disagreements that left no public record. You want credit for invisible actions. Melania's voice sounded strained. You are being overly aggressive. I'm being thorough, Jasmine said. There's a difference. If you had a strong record of public advocacy, you could reference it, but we're not seeing that. The studio audience was captivated, fully drawn into the escalating exchange. This wasn't the standard political debate people expected. It had become a live examination of contrasting leadership styles, values, and expectations. Jasmine leaned in, her voice shifting, still strong but now carrying a quieter intensity. Let's move to something broader, she said. Not about policies or positions. Let's talk about the difference between public image and private pressure. Melania's posture stiffened again, though nothing inappropriate had been said. The shift caught her off guard. What do you mean? She asked cautiously. You've spoken often about dignity, privacy, and calm, and I respect those values. But for years, you presented a controlled image of grace, elegance, and distance. Yet privately, the pressures must have been enormous. Your husband was at the center of constant controversy. The nation was polarized. The media was relentless. That environment affects anyone in the spotlight. Melania said nothing, her expression unreadable. Jasmine continued. The question is simple. How did you balance the public expectation that you be perfectly composed with the private reality of navigating national turmoil? How did those pressures shape your leadership? Did they limit you? Did they silence you? Did they influence decisions about what to speak on and what to stay silent about? Color drained slightly from Melania's face, not from accusation, but from the unexpected vulnerability of the question. My private challenges are my own, she said quietly. I handled them the best way I could. And I believe that, Jasmine said. But when leaders rely heavily on image without sharing the reality behind it, that image becomes a wall instead of a window. People don't see the full picture. They can't understand your choices. I don't have to reveal everything, Melania said sharply. No one is asking for everything, Jasmine replied calmly. But leadership requires openness, not about personal details, about personal truth. The truth of what shaped you, what influenced you, what limited you. Melania's voice cracked slightly. I will not be forced to discuss private pressures on national television. I'm not forcing you, Jasmine said calmly. I'm pointing out something important. Leadership isn't only about polished presentations. It's about showing people how you managed challenges, what you learned, how you grew. Without that, the public sees style, not substance. Melania stood up again. I will not participate further. This is not what I agreed to. It's exactly what leadership requires, Jasmine responded, standing as well. Leaders face difficult questions. Leaders talk about growth. Leaders acknowledge the reality of their journey instead of relying only on controlled narratives. Melania stepped away from her chair. I came here for a civil conversation. Instead, I have been confronted with criticism disguised as inquiry. No, you've been presented with questions you didn't prepare for, and instead of engaging, you're leaving. This is character attack. This is leadership evaluation, Jasmine replied. If honest questions feel threatening, that reveals a problem, not with the questions, but with the foundation behind the public image. Melania removed her microphone. I will not continue. And, once again, you walk away when accountability appears. Melania left the stage. The studio fell completely silent. Dana Bash looked stunned as she turned to Jasmine. Congresswoman, would you like to make a closing statement? Jasmine inhaled deeply and addressed the camera. What we saw tonight wasn't just a disagreement. It was a test of leadership. Public image versus public responsibility. Mrs. Trump built a persona defined by elegance and caution. But leadership isn't only about appearing composed. It's about answering difficult questions, owning your decisions, and acknowledging the pressures behind your choices.
When invited to discuss her record, her values, and her beliefs, she chose to leave. And that choice speaks for itself. Leadership requires more than controlled photographs, selective interviews, and careful scripts. It requires presence, accountability, honesty about the challenges faced behind the scenes. She paused, letting the moment settle. Tonight made one thing clear. Image without openness can't sustain leadership, and when the image is challenged, it collapses. The audience remained silent as the program cut to commercial break. Within minutes, social media erupted. Clips of Melania leaving circulated rapidly. Commentators debated whether the conversation had been too harsh or simply necessary. Some defended Melania, arguing she was treated unfairly. Others argued Jasmine asked questions that had been avoided for years. Across platforms, people discussed public image, leadership pressure, and how political figures handled scrutiny. Jasmine's office began receiving interview requests. The debate had shifted from personalities to a larger national conversation about transparency, leadership, and the challenges of balancing public image with private strain. The night had become more than a debate. It had become a turning point in how the country understood leadership itself. The studio lights glowed softly over the stage as the debate continued. Melania straightened in her chair. I worked hard, she said firmly. I built my career before entering public life. I earned my place in this country. Jasmine Crockett shook her head slightly. Many people work hard, but leadership isn't just about effort. It's also about access, influence, and responsibility. When you have a platform, people expect transparency and accountability. Showing courage means facing difficult questions, not just maintaining appearances. Melania's expression tightened. That feels like an insult. It's honesty, Jasmine said calmly. Leadership is about presenting your story fully, the successes and the challenges. You can't claim leadership only through image. Melania stood up, her movements sharp. I don't have to stay here and be spoken to like this. Jasmine responded quickly, still composed. You accepted this debate. You came here to speak about leadership. Leaders don't walk away the moment someone challenges them. They engage. They answer hard questions. They stand in the tension. This is not tension. This is attack, Melania replied. This is accountability, Jasmine said firmly, and accountability is part of leadership. The cameras captured every second of the tense moment. After a long pause, Melania returned to her seat, her posture defensive. I will continue, she said, but I expect respect. You've had respect. Now you need to show honesty. Leadership is measured by how you respond under scrutiny, not how well you manage your image. Dana Bash tried to shift the topic. Mrs. Trump, in recent interviews, you've said you didn't always agree with some decisions during your husband's administration. Can you be specific? Melania exhaled slowly, relieved at the chance to speak on familiar ground. I didn't agree with everything, she said.
I had my own views, but I also understood my role was to support without creating conflict. That's still very general, Jasmine pressed. Which policies did you question? Which actions did you try to influence? Leadership isn't just private feelings, it's using your voice to create impact. I spoke privately about concerns, Melania said. Private conversations matter less if they don't result in action, Jasmine replied. Leadership is public, it's accountability. If you had influence, why wasn't it visible? Why weren't your positions on critical issues clear to the public? Melania paused, clearly unsettled. I did what I could in my role. You could have done more, Jasmine said firmly. That the public looks to leaders for courage, for accountability. Saying nothing, remaining silent, that is a choice too, and it carries consequences. The audience watched, rapt. This wasn't the typical debate. This was a live examination of leadership, values, and integrity. Jasmine leaned in, her voice softening slightly. Let's shift to another angle. Public image versus private pressures. You've often been described as poised, elegant, composed, but we all know public life can be relentless. How did you navigate that tension? How did it influence your decisions, your public appearances, and your approach to leadership? Melania's posture stiffened, caught off guard by the intensity of the question. I handled challenges the best I could, she said quietly. And yet, when challenges arose, your public record shows careful management of image over transparency, Jasmine said. True leadership doesn't shy away from showing the hard reality. It doesn't rely solely on curated appearances. It shows growth, decision-making, and responsibility. Melania looked away briefly. I am entitled to privacy. Of course, Jasmine said gently, but leadership is about showing enough of yourself so that people understand your decisions, your approach, and your responsibility. You can maintain dignity while still being accountable. Melania's voice cracked slightly. I will not be forced to reveal private struggles on national television. No one is asking for private details, Jasmine said. I'm asking about leadership, how you balance public expectation with real-world pressures, how your choices reflected responsibility, not just image. The former First Lady stood up again. I came here for a conversation, not an interrogation. This is a conversation about leadership, Jasmine replied, standing as well. Leaders face hard questions. They explain their choices. They accept accountability. If that feels uncomfortable, it's a sign the public sees what really matters. Melania left the stage, visibly frustrated. The studio went silent. Dana Bash turned to Jasmine. Congresswoman, would you like to make a closing statement? Jasmine exhaled and faced the camera. What we saw tonight isn't just a disagreement, it's a lesson in leadership. Leadership isn't controlled images or staged appearances, it's accountability, transparency, and engagement under pressure. When challenged to explain her record, the responses were limited and defensive. Leadership requires openness, and openness builds trust. Without it, image collapses under scrutiny. She continued, this debate showed that presenting an image is easy. Owning responsibility and answering tough questions is hard. Real leadership requires courage and honesty, and that is what the public should look for in anyone claiming to lead. Social media exploded within minutes. Clips of the exchange circulated widely. Analysts debated whether the debate was fair, too harsh, or necessary. Some criticized Jasmine, others applauded her focus on accountability and leadership standards. Conversations about public image, ethical responsibility, and leadership standards dominated news cycles.
The debate had become more than a TV segment. It had become a clear example of what true leadership demands: honesty, courage, and the ability to face scrutiny without retreating. The debate stage was tense, the cameras rolling as both women faced off. You hid behind privacy and dignity while lending your presence and your silence to an administration that made real mistakes affecting millions of Americans, Jasmine said firmly. Melania's accent sharpened as her voice rose slightly. You're being very disrespectful. I am being honest, Jasmine countered. If that feels disrespectful, maybe that's a sign of the gap between image and action.
I came here for a conversation about leadership, not to attack anyone personally, but leadership means defending your choices. Give one example of you using your platform courageously instead of cautiously. Melania hesitated, her composure flickering. I worked on issues affecting children. I highlighted adoption, awareness about opioid addiction, and children's well-being. That work mattered. Did it? Jasmine pressed. What measurable changes resulted from your initiatives, or were they safe, non-controversial topics that avoided conflict with broader policies? I helped people, Melania said softly. How? Jasmine asked. Give concrete examples of impact. Show accountability beyond raising awareness. Melania struggled. Her answers remained vague, full of good intentions but without measurable outcomes. Jasmine's expression hardened. This is the problem with your claim to leadership. It's aesthetics without substance. You took safe positions for 4 years, and now you want credit? Leadership is about action, accountability, and risk, not comfort and image. Melania's voice rose slightly. I demonstrated leadership in my own way. Your way was invisible, ineffective, and centered on protecting yourself, Jasmine said. That is self-preservation, not leadership. Dana Bash interjected, attempting to redirect. Perhaps we can discuss immigration policy, Mrs. Trump. Melania exhaled, grateful for a shift to a topic she could frame positively. Yes, I came to America legally. I worked hard to build my life here. I understand what it means to love this country and to contribute to it. Jasmine's tone grew serious. But having access and resources also shapes your perspective. Did you use your platform to help others navigate challenges in the system, or did your silence during policy debates allow inequities to persist? Melania shifted in her seat. I followed the legal process. I worked within the system. Exactly. You had access, others don't, Jasmine said, and your silence while others struggled meant you benefited from a system while many could not. Leadership isn't just following the rules, it's using your platform to create fairness and opportunity. Melania's composure started to fracture. I am being twisted. My story is my own. You made it public by speaking about immigrants and leadership, Jasmine said calmly. Using your story to claim authority requires accountability. Melania stood abruptly. I don't have to sit here and be insulted. You accepted this debate, Jasmine said firmly. Leaders don't run when challenged. This is accountability, not attack. If you can't handle questions about your platform and your public service, you're not ready for public leadership. For a tense moment, Melania teetered between leaving and staying. The cameras captured every expression, every pause. Finally, she returned to her seat, body defensive. I will stay, she said, but I ask that we maintain the respect. You have been respected, Jasmine replied. Now show leadership by answering questions directly. Dana Bash tried again. Mrs. Trump, you said you sometimes disagreed with your husband's decisions. Can you give specifics? Melania exhaled, looking relieved. I didn't always agree. I had my own views, but my role was to support, not create public conflict. That's not enough, Jasmine pressed. What specifically did you disagree with? Which actions did you try to influence? Leadership is public responsibility, not private sentiment. If your private advocacy had no impact, it's not leadership, it's silence. Melania went quiet. Jasmine leaned forward. You want credit for resistance. You didn't demonstrate it. Leadership requires accountability, visibility, and action. Silence doesn't count. Melania's voice cracked. You are being very aggressive. I am being persistent, Jasmine said. There's a difference. What you can't answer shows the absence of leadership, not a lack of questions. The audience remained captivated. This was beyond a standard debate. The carefully constructed public image was being dissected in real time. Jasmine softened her tone. Let's shift slightly. Leadership also means using your platform responsibly. You had opportunities to influence policy and public conversation. How did you approach that? Melania paused, composure slipping. I did what I could within my role. That wasn't enough, Jasmine said. Leadership demands courage, transparency, and accountability. When you remain silent, the public suffers, and so does your credibility as a leader.
Melania stood again. "I came here for a discussion, not an interrogation." "This is a discussion about leadership," Jasmine said. "Leaders face hard questions, they explain choices, they accept responsibility. That is what defines them." Melania left the stage frustrated, the cameras still rolling. Dana Bash turned to Jasmine. "Congresswoman, closing remarks?" Jasmine looked into the camera. "Tonight showed the difference between image and leadership. Leadership is about accountability, courage, and transparency. When confronted with tough questions, those who hide behind image alone will falter. That is the lesson for the public. True leadership is visible, responsible, and courageous under scrutiny." The debate clips spread rapidly online. Analysts debated the exchange, but the key takeaway remained clear. Leadership requires action and accountability, not just appearances. Dana Bash looked concerned. "Congresswoman, I'm not sure this line of questioning is appropriate." Jasmine faced Melania. "Mrs. Trump, you spent 4 years presenting a carefully curated image of your family. Now you want to rehabilitate that image and position yourself as a leader. Leadership requires honesty. It requires addressing uncomfortable truths instead of hiding behind privacy." Melania's face went pale. "You have no right to make accusations about me or my family." "I'm not making accusations," Jasmine replied firmly. "I'm observing patterns and asking questions. If that makes you defensive, maybe that's a sign of the gap between image and action." "I am defending my privacy," Melania said, standing. "I will not sit here and listen to this. This is not debate, it is character assassination." "If asking tough questions feels like character assassination," Jasmine said, standing as well, "maybe your public persona is more fragile than you want to admit. Leadership means accountability, even when it's uncomfortable. You want the benefits of public life without responsibility. You want to be seen as a leader without demonstrating leadership. That's not leadership." Melania looked at the camera and Dana Bash. "I came here in good faith for a discussion about leadership. Instead, I've been subjected to personal attacks. This is what's wrong with politics today." "Respect is earned," Jasmine said. "Leadership isn't about image, it's about action, accountability, and willingness to face questions about your record. You had the chance to demonstrate that. You chose to leave instead." Melania removed her microphone and walked off the stage. The studio fell silent. Dana Bash looked from the empty chair to Jasmine. "Congresswoman, closing remarks?"